Hi everyone, Lior is here with another Jumpstart Lightning episode, and we are continuing our nuts and bolts video series. Today we're going to talk about Azure Arc-enabled servers at scale onboarding. Stay tuned. Hi everyone, Lior is here with another Jumpstart Lightning episode. We are continuing our nuts and bolts video series. Today I have Aurnov again with me. Aurnov, how are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. For the audience that are meeting you for the first time, who you are and what is it that you do?
Yeah, I'm Arnav. I'm a PM working on Azure Arc on the server side.
Arnav, you and I have been having quite few conversations around Azure
Mhm.
Arc-enabled servers, and in previous episodes of Nuts and Bolts, we talked about multiple topics, right? We talked about extensions, onboarding, but we really talked about things in the manual side of the house, right? Kind of an interactive onboarding conversation. And today we want to talk about at-scale onboarding using service principles. So, can you educate me and the audience what this is all about, like Azure Arc-enabled servers at-scale onboarding?
Right on. So a question we get a lot of the times is how do you onboard your servers at scale to Azure Arc? And we walk through the different ways that you can do onboarding at kind of a single server level. And that's going to require you to enter your credentials using a device login. But sometimes that doesn't make sense, especially when we're really leveraging a lot of the at scale Arc management capabilities around organization, around monitoring at scale, governing at scale, securing at scale that Arc affords. And so to facilitate that onboarding at scale, we recommend customers use service principles. And so the service principle, in this case, a service principle managed identity, is going to afford customers this way to onboard using our script without having to do an interactive device login on a per
Mhm.
machine basis. And so this makes it much easier to onboard their servers at scale to Azure Arc, and they can use the automation or deployment tooling of their choice. So, for example, we've had customers use an Ansible playbook to do this
Mhm.
deployment to their Linux servers. We've had customers use group policy with a schedule task to deploy the script at scale. We've had configuration manager be used for
Mhm.
custom task sequence, for example. So really, this service principle-based script affords customers a lot of flexibility in terms of using the automation tooling of their choice to
Mhm.
to non-interactively onboard their servers at scale without having a sort of permissions gap either. Um, and so that's really the power of the
Mhm.
service principal at scale onboarding we're going to be chatting about today.
And Arnav, you touch very important points here. The one that I can relate to the most is this. The fact that customers can choose whatever it is that they're using today in order to do this. And coming back or taking a step back, uh, talking about Azure Arc, and Azure Arc is really about being non-disruptive technology in the sense that you're using your own tools, you're using your own methodologies and processes inside the organization to do this type of stuff. And I think that the at scale onboarding using those methods that you refer to, like Ansible playbooks or chef cookbooks and configuration management and all this stuff. And to be completely honest, we're using that all the time, like service principle onboarding with the Jumpstart automation scenarios and RBox all the time. So tell me, Arnav, is this something that is documented where customers can actually find this? And do you have a demo to show me?
Yep, right on. So this is both documented and something we're going to be demoing today. So let's jump right into the documentation. And so here you see this article walking through
Hmm.
connecting hybrid machines to Azure at scale under our connect machines at scale option. It should be noted that we do have a number of interactive deployment options through, for example, through
Yeah.
Windows Admin Center, through DSC, through the device login script that we've already seen. And
Hmm.
here we use the service principal script. We also have documentation on automating this with configuration manager through custom task sequence, for example.
Hmm.
And so you see through this article, we kind of walk through the different steps, but it's basically about first creating that Azure Active Directory service principal, and you're going to be using that instead of your privileged identity to connect with the machine.
Hmm.
And then you're going to be passing on that service principal information to the AZCM agent command in order
Hmm.
to connect those machines to Azure for our typical Arc-enabled server onboarding experience. And so we walk through both the process of creating a service principal for
Hmm.
onboarding, and we offer some flexibility here too. So you can create a service principal through PowerShell if this is your kind of preferred format where you're going to be able to collect a secret for that service principal, or you can do it directly through Azure Portal as well. So there's a little bit of flexibility. And after that, you're going to be going into Azure Portal in order to generate an installation script that you can then run on your machines at scale. And you can use that automation tooling we just spoke about, or
Yeah.
you can do this on a per server basis as well. So you have that flexibility.
And one of the things that I really like about this whole concept of service principal, it's not because of the service principal, which is pretty straightforward concept. Service principal are being used in Azure all the time for different type of services, different type of things. But what I really like is the fact that we actually embedded that capability of creating the right service principal inside the Arc Center, inside the portal, which is something that I find very cool because it really shows a user experience orientation implementation. That was a mouthful, but that's really kind of how I'm thinking about this.
Right on. That's exactly how we're thinking about it too, where we want to make it easy to create that targeted service principal with just the Azure connected
Hmm.
machine onboarding role assignment that's going to only give you the credentials necessary to onboard non-Azure servers to
Hmm.
Arc and nothing else. And so we're really focused on providing a kind of ease of experience on that
Yeah.
service principal creation workflow without any compromises to kind of your security posture.
So let's see that in action. Let's see kind
Awesome.
of the flow end to end.
Yep, great. So right now I'm in Azure Arc within the Azure portal view. I've gone down to management and under custom locations and data controllers, we have service principals. So I'm
Hmm.
right here in the service principal flow, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm working today within a subscription called Tailwind Manufacturing, where we're going to be working on the nuts and bolts manufacturing, quite literally. And so we're going to go ahead and create a service principal for ourselves. And
Hmm.
so we can call that the nuts and bolts service principal. And we can actually target it in terms of its scope assignment level too.
Hmm.
So it's not just you have to do this at an entire subscription level. We can narrow this down into the specific resource group we're going to be working with today. So we're going to be selecting the Tailwind manufacturing group, and then we're
Hmm.
specifically going to be looking within um, the nuts and bolts manufacturer resource group, where we're
Hmm.
planning to land these resources. We then have the flexibility to determine how long we're going to set for the client secret expiration, as
Hmm.
well as whether or not we're going to be using a kind of description in order to uh, generate that service principal client secret, if there's a friendly name you'd prefer to use.
Hmm.
Otherwise, we're going to be using the automated form.
And I really like the fact that we are like this is a great user experience when you're putting this 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. Because again, coming back to the use case here, this is really the service principal that is responsible for onboarding those Arc-enabled servers, right? And when we're talking about at scale onboarding, we're talking about integrating with those tools that we spoke about, right? And
Mhm.
that really makes sense because you don't want to have those service principles as long live service principles. You want to have those kind of with with the TTL, with the just in time notion. So I really like the fact that we included that as part of the user experience. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you can kind of pick depending on how long you project your deployment to take.
Yeah.
Here we see the two different service principal roles. Here we are onboarding to Arc-enabled servers, so we're going to be using the Azure Connected Machine onboarding role in
Hmm.
particular. And that's going to, again, limit the capabilities with the service principal, where you not only need the secret, but even with the secret, the only thing you can do is onboard to Azure Arc, your machines. And so now that we've created our service principal details, we're going to go ahead and click create. And it'll just take a few moments to get created. Awesome. So right here we have our client ID and we have our client secret. Our client secret will be expiring tomorrow, right at this time. And
Hmm.
so we're actually going to be using these details later on in terms of our onboarding experience. So I'm just going to keep this open,
Hmm.
this copy details part open as we move to the next phase, which is generating our onboarding script that's going to be leveraging the service principal. And you can do that right from Azure as well.
So in the previous nuts and bolts, when we talked about video that we talked about the manual onboarding, we had this device token that we had to, or device login that we had to enter. And
Mm.
right now we're doing a service principal onboarding, which will not require this. So let's see how the script looks like, and let's see if we can onboard some servers using this.
Yep, right on. And so we talked about that device login that's on the left, add a single server. Here we're going to
Mhm,
be doing multiple servers, and we're going to go ahead, generate the script. These are very similar to the previously reviewed prereqs,
mhm,
HTTPS access, local admin permissions, connectivity. We're going to be using public endpoint today, and an SPN with the Azure Connected Machine onboarding role that we just created. And we have that landing resource group, which is going to be the nuts and bolts manufacturer resource group that we just
mhm,
scoped our SPN to. So here we're going to be talking about our landing zone within Azure. So we're going to be picking Tailwind Manufacturing, and in particular, we're going to be picking that nuts and bolts manufacturer resource group that we just talked about.
mhm,
Um, we'll focus on East US as our region, Windows for our OS, and our connectivity method will be public endpoint. Next, we're going to be selecting a service principal. And so here we can see we've actually already pre-populated because we only have the nuts and bolts SPN for our specific resource group scoping.
mhm,
That's the one that's automatically there, pre-picked for you under authentication. Tags we can skip for now. We could add a custom nuts and bolt tag, but we'll skip
mhm,
that. And there we have it. We are going to need to register our subscription first. And now that we've submitted that registration with our RPs, we're going to be able to download and copy the script for service principal based onboarding. One thing to note is the service principal secret piece, right?
mhm.
Here, there's a place to enter your secret. And so you noted that it kept the other tab open. That's why. When we're going to
Yeah.
be running that script, we're going to actually need to populate in the actual service principal secret. So I'm going
Mhm,
to go ahead. I'm going to copy this, and I have these two servers that I'm RDPing into that are Windows servers. So I'm going to
mhm,
paste the script in right there. And I'm actually going to go ahead and do this for the other one too, um, just so that we're kind of repeating. And
mhm,
we could also leverage some sort of automation along that too. For example, if this was a collection of devices, we could use Configuration Manager console to deploy the
mhm,
script. There's a lot, but just because it's two, we'll just show this in a little bit more of a abridged format. And here we are going to be entering in that service principal secret, just
mhm,
copying that right in there and copying that into the other one as well, right there. Perfect. And so now we can go ahead and actually just run this. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to be running this onboarding script. And so this is again quite similar to what we've seen before. The
mhm,
key caveat being instead of having that interactive device login, we're going to be using that service principal within the AC CM agent command. And
mhm.
so let's go ahead and let's run this. Fingers crossed. And I'm going to go ahead and do this for the other one too, just so we can save time. And the beauty is we don't actually have to do anything interactive, so I can just let both kind of go simultaneously. Versus the other experience, I'd actually have to do the device login, right?
Yeah. So
So,
Arnav, while this is running, what I wanted to point out is how to take this type of onboarding method and maybe expand it to to real life. We talked about configuration management, we talked about
mhm,
Ansible as just as an examples, but really, if you have a process, if you have a customer, if you're a customer and you have a process that actually creates servers as part of your application, CI pipeline or something around these lines,
mhm,
and these servers obviously deployed outside of Azure, and you want to include as part of that automation, you want to actually onboard those servers as Azure Arc-enabled servers in an automatic fashion, that will be a very valid way to do so using the service principle incorporated as part of this. And like we talked about, that secret is also not a long-lasting secret. It's actually time boxed to a specific time. So I think that's really another use case that our audience wants to think about as they're looking at you doing this onboarding.
Yeah, that's a great point. You don't necessarily have to leverage all of those kind of onboarding and automation tools that we talked about. The service principal script can be deployed at that time of VM creation as well. And so here we're already seeing the the on-premise servers that we just connected through that service principal method being
Mhm.
onboarded, and they're showing up here under Tailwind Manufacturing in our nuts and bolts manufacturer resource group coming up right here. And so we can see that it's already been created. Great.
Mhm.
And we're going to see the other one also being created. Great. So that's the kind of high level overview uh, of using service principles to onboard your machines at scale. And we see that experience is documented and ready for your usage and your consumption.
And obviously, we're going to share the document right below in the description. Thanks, Arno, for showing me this at scale onboarding method using service principle. And for our Jumpstart audience, if you want to continue watching the Nuts and Bolts video series and and other Jumpstart Lightning videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, so we can continue support this type of resources and bring people like Arnav and the rest of the product group into the Jumpstart Lightning and have some cool conversations around what is happening behind the scenes and what are the cool stories that we can share around the Azure Arc-enabled servers. Arnav, I want to say thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the Jumpstart audience for staying tuned, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much for having me. Bye.